Okay, well, welcome. Welcome to those who are viewing, if anybody is viewing. I guess in a few minutes everybody will start coming on. But I am all by my lonesome again, so this is going to be a virtual Bible study as I Bible study to myself on the screen. But we'll start off. I'm going to do a different hymn. I think that St. Matthew will forgive us for not singing his hymn, but we're going to sing the Christmas Contagion since we're in that season. So I've got it here on my phone, and hopefully I don't mess it up too bad. Although there's one part I'm still trying to get right. On this day the Virgin Maid goes to the grotto to give birth to the pre-eternal Word in an ineffable manner. Dance for joy, O you inhabited earth on hearing, glorify, along with angels and with the shepherds, him who will that he appear as a newborn child, the pre-eternal God. Shine within our hearts, loving match, and pure light of divine knowledge, and open the eyes of our minds so that we might understand the message of your gospel. Instill within us also the fear of your blessed commandments, that having trampled upon carnal desires, we may all enter a spiritual way of living, both thinking and doing only those things that are well-pleasing to you. For you, Christ God, are our sanctification and illumination. To you we give glory, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, now and forever in the ages of ages. Amen. So I will get situated. Oh boy, there we go. It feels slightly apocalyptic to be sitting here in the dark with nobody around and just talking into a computer. So if I start saying silly things, you'll forgive me. But we will continue the Bible study because I know people do log in to watch and to see what's going on, and so I don't want to miss it on the off chance that somebody's there, even though it still says 0 viewers. So we'll have to see what happens. Anyway, here we are, December 2nd, so we are on Matthew chapter, well, we should be on Matthew chapter 10, but we didn't quite finish chapter 9 last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess. Yeah, because Thanksgiving was last week. So we'll finish up the end of chapter 9, and then we'll try to get through chapter 10, and we'll go from there. And then we'll continue on through till Christmas. Of course, we'll take the week after Christmas. I don't know what it is, but Christmas Eve, is that a Thursday? So it'll be the night before Christmas Eve. We won't have Bible study then. I'll have to look at the schedule, but we'll talk about it more as we get closer to that. Obviously, I can't remember off the top of my head. So anyway, hello. Somebody is there. There's one viewer. Hey, Paul. Probably the whole family, right, too? Hello, everybody. So here we are, chapter 9, verse 27. So we've gone through. There we go. It's so funny. Marina's like, you're not by yourself. It still feels apocalyptic, though. So chapter 9, we've gotten through, of course, the Sermon on the Mount, and it's where Christ taught with authority and kind of turned all the power structures upside down. And then chapter 9, he's going through. Actually, it was chapter 8, wasn't it? Yeah, so chapter 8, he's showing that he has the authority by exhibiting acts of authority where he heals by a word, he raises, or he heals the centurion's servant, and then he calms the storm and all that kind of stuff. Then we get into chapter 9, and we see the faith of the paralytic kind of contrast a little bit with the faith. Well, the blind men see who he is. The Pharisees, of course, don't see who he is. And then you also have the Gentiles having faith, whereas the Jews don't. So all those kind of dynamics are going on there. But we got up through the healing of Jairus' daughter, although she's not named Jairus in Matthew. We know that from St. Mark, and the one with the hemorrhage. But I think we got to verse 27. If I'm wrong, then somebody remind me. And just send me a little thing. Oh, hey there, Danny and Hannah. Your home looks awesome, by the way. Good job. So that's where we are. So we'll start off with verse 27. And as Jesus passed on from there, 2 blind men followed him, crying aloud, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." So the first thing we have to talk about is that Son of David part, because that's pretty relevant. Son of David, of course, you could really say that of anybody who was in the royal family, so within Judea, within the whole tribe of Judea. But it had come to be a messianic title. So to call somebody the Son of David isn't just saying, hey, you're descended from David. They're saying that it's a messianic title. So they're saying that he is the son of David, the expected awaited Son of David, which will be the Messiah. So these two blind men are recognizing Christ as Messiah. And that's contrasted with the Pharisees, who do not recognize him as the Messiah. And so there's this kind of irony that the blind men are the one who see clearly and that the Pharisees don't see clearly. So that's where we go. So when he entered the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said to them. Now, this is interesting because he doesn't heal them out on the street. Now, the other Gospels kind of have him just right there at the moment when they interrupt him, but now he's actually bringing him in the house. So there's this sense that he kind of pulls them aside and he says, okay, I'm going to do something, but I don't want it to be, I don't want people to be looking for signs in order to believe in me. So when he entered the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said to them, do you believe that I'm able to do this? And they said to him, yes, Lord. Then he touched their eyes, saying, according to your faith, be it done to you. And their eyes were open, and Jesus sternly charged them, see that no one knows about it. But they went away and spread his fame throughout the district. So it's one of these things where he says, don't go tell everybody, but they go tell everybody. And that happens a few times. The only one he says, go tell everybody, is the demoniac in the Gergesenes that we saw in the last chapter. He has authority over the demons. And that's also the same dynamic hits in here again, is where in Matthew's account, there's two blind men. If you look in the other synoptic gospels, there's only the one blind man. Now, could there have been two and there was just one that kind of stood out, and so that's one the other synoptic gospel writers wrote about? Yes, and that's what a lot of people that need the Bible to be literally and factually exact and precise, they'll say that, and it's believable. But probably more to the point is that Matthew, again, is writing to a Jewish audience. And just like we had with the two demoniacs, it's probably reflecting the Jewish legal requirement to have two witnesses for something to be true. And so for it to be legally permissible, you need to have two witnesses. So we have this, they call it the Matthew's doubles, the doubling in Matthew. And so he has it with the demoniacs, and now he's having it with the blind men. So there's going to be two, especially at these moments where there are claims of messianic identity. So with the demoniacs, he says, well, the demons say, what have you to do with us, O Son of God? So they're declaring him as Son of God, as this messianic figure. And of course, if you remember, the Son of God is a phrase that has messianic connotations, but without the militaristic and political kind of overtones if they called him Messiah. So they don't say, are you the Messiah? They say, are you the Son of God? Son of man, I'm sorry, is the other one. But Son of God, they're actually recognizing him as divine in this. So because it is a messianic, because it is a claim of divinity, Matthew has the two witnesses in there so that he can show this is, according to Jewish law, the legal code, this is appropriate, that there's two witnesses, therefore this is true. So there he has the doubling there. Now here, it's because of that title, Son of David, because it's a messianic claim. So now the blind man is witnessing that that Jesus is the Christ, is the Messiah, the Son of David. So you have two witnesses in order for it to be an appropriate witness through Jewish law. And so he says, do you believe that I'm able to do this? They said to him, yes, Lord. And that believe there, pistevo, is kind of the same thing we talk about when we're talking about believe. It's not an epistemological thing, meaning that it's not, do you think I can do this? It's, do you trust? Are you coming to me because you heard about this, or are you coming to me because you really expect me to heal you and to give you sight? And they say, yes, Lord, we believe, we trust you. So he touches their eyes physically, and according to your faith, be it done to you. And their eyes were open. And then Jesus sternly charged them. That's where they go and they tell everybody. And the reason here, in Mark, there's something called the Messianic secret. And Mark keeps telling, Christ keeps telling everybody, be quiet, tells the demons, tells the people he heals and everybody else. And so there's this big debate of what the Messianic secret is. Why is Christ being secretive? And the answer is really because he's not ready yet to reveal himself in his full Messianic glory. So what's happening here in Matthew is you still have these things where Christ is telling people to be quiet, but it doesn't have the same connotations it has in Mark. It's not this big Messianic secret. But what it is very practical, is that when Christ begins to draw large crowds, he can't go into town, he has to flee in a boat, he can't get around, he can't travel, he can't preach, there's just too many people. So it's a logistic thing, is if his fame spreads too far, too wide, too quickly, he's not able to witness and to allow the kingdom to become present through his healing, through his exorcisms, and through his preaching and everything else. So he's telling people, don't go and spread it about yet, because I still have more people to reach, and at a certain point, it's just going to be too hard for me, and I'm going to have to move out of this region and go somewhere else because the crowd's going to just be too big. That's what's going on there. And as they were going away, behold, a dumb demoniac, and that doesn't mean a stupid demoniac, it's one that can't speak. As they were going away, behold, a dumb demoniac was brought to him. And when the demon had been cast out, the dumb man spoke, and the crowds marveled, saying, never was anything like this seen in Israel. But the Pharisees said, he casts out demons by the prince of demons. Now, we talked about this last 2 weeks ago, but I don't know. I mean, I didn't even remember until I looked at my notes, so I don't know if you guys, but there's this pattern in chapter 9 that there's somebody shows faith, and then there's criticism. Somebody shows faith, and then there's criticism. Somebody shows faith, and then there's criticism. So you had with the healing of the paralytic, and then you turn around right after that, and you have the scribe saying he's blaspheming. He says, I forgive your sins. And then you have him sitting at a table with the tax collectors, and they criticize him because he's sitting with tax collectors and sinners. And then you have the fasting issue, and on and on and on. So here you have him healing the blind men and healing this demoniac. And then suddenly the Pharisees are saying, well, you're doing it by the power of Beelzebub, by the prince of demons. And of course, we have the answer from the other Gospels. He says, well, even if I am doing it by the power of Beelzebub, then it's a house divided, and the kingdom of heaven is breaking forward anyway, because the kingdom of Satan is falling. But of course, here he's just saying he's getting the criticism, so you don't have to make a big deal out of it. Why didn't Jesus come in an age of mass? Why didn't Jesus come in an age of mass communication? Can you imagine if Christ was incarnate now, and what would happen to him being politicized? So I think it's mass communication. And actually, it's kind of interesting you'd ask that question when we're getting to chapter 10, because in chapter 10 we see how he evangelized, and he sent them out 2 by 2. And wouldn't that have been easier if there was cars and there was everything else? The easy answer, which we could probably debate and get into and kind of explore a little bit, but the easy answer is that the time when Christ became incarnate was the right time for him to do his ministry. So you had a relatively peaceful time in the Roman Empire. There wasn't you could travel easily and more safely. There was one language that kind of bound the area. And then you'd have to ask God exactly why, coming later on. But I just think there's too much room for, especially in our culture, too much room for spin and everything else. So I just don't think it would make any sense for him to come at that point. But again, kind of a question for God. But the church answer, the church fathers, they always talk about the kairos versus chronos, that it's not chronological time, it's God's time. And so a lot of people debate why this was kairos, why this was the proper time in God's plan. And there's lots of things. Mostly it's the Pax Romana, and then it's also, they did actually have traveling. I don't know why. I haven't really thought too much about why he didn't wait till later, but I guess he didn't. We can ask him on the 25th. And Jesus went about all their cities and villages, teaching their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, healing every disease and infirmity. That's almost word for word what he said at the end of his last little journey. So these are called summary passages, and basically Matthew uses them to break up the story. He says, okay, now he's out preaching, and then this thing happened. Now he's going to go out and preach some more, and now this thing's going to happen. And so he breaks it up. And what he's doing right here is he's breaking it up between the Sermon on the Mount and then the aftermath of his expressing the authority he was teaching with. And now he's going to break it up because chapter 10 is his discourse on missionary work and what mission looks like. So he breaks that up by saying he's healed every disease and every infirmity. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they are harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. He's already starting to set up the next part. A very common image for Israel in the Old Testament is, and even among rabbis, is that it's the flock. So it's the sheep, the flock of sheep. And so he's saying they're there without a shepherd. And he's not talking about part of Israel. He's talking about entirety of Israel. And we're going to see that in just a minute too. That when he says, send me to the lost, you're going to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He's not talking, those few sheep that are lost in Israel. He's talking about you're going to Israel, which is a house of lost sheep. And you're going to go out there and you're going to bring them back into the flock. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Pray therefore the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. And this really is setting up chapter 10, because he's about to say, you're the laborers, go out into the harvest and go out and go out 2 by 2 and preach and heal and cast out demons and all that kind of thing. So this part of the passage is really just setting up the next thing. But this image of Israel is really important because you're setting up the idea of the sheep and the shepherd, hello, the sheep and the shepherd, and then you're talking about the laborers being sent out to call the lost sheep back. And you're going to see that happen. So there we go. So we get to chapter 10. Now we're caught up. It only took us 15 minutes. So there we go. So chapter 10, and he called to him his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every disease and infirmity. So now he's taking the signposts of his missionary work were healing people, casting out unclean spirits, okay, they're raising the dead, but that'll come later. So he basically gives them his authority. You're going to go exercise this authority on my behalf. So it's kind of forced multiplication. Here you have the one teacher, and now he's saying, okay, now I'm going to take these 12, and we're going to go out and you're going to do the same thing. And so he sets it up. And by the way, we're 10 chapters in, and we're just now getting listed the 12 disciples. But that's because he wanted this list to be with this discourse. So Matthew just kind of waited on that. Hello, welcome. We do have somebody. I'm not all alone anymore, so I'm safe. It's okay. So then he comes to this list of 12. So the names of the 12 apostles are these. And this, by the way, it's the first time and the only time he uses the word apostle. So it's really very much a title. It's very much a technical expression of who they are. And apostomenos, apostle, just means he who is sent out, the person that is sent out. So it's very appropriate here when he's about to send them out to actually label them and call them technically the technical title apostles. The rest of the time he just says, and the disciples. So he sticks with that. But here he is the names of the 12 apostles. And obviously number 12 is relevant. We talked about this a bunch of times. But 12, because the 12 tribes of Israel, we're on chapter 10, verse 2. So the 12 tribes of Israel, and then Christ also tells the disciples, you will sit on the 12 thrones, judging the 12 thrones. So what this really is, and why he says go to the lost sheep of Israel, the house of Israel, which we'll talk about in a second. But the reason he talks about that is because they are restoring the true Israel. So the Israel has, I don't know if I'm going to talk to you now, I have to go back and forth, but the true Israel is being reestablished through Christ and the 12 apostles as the fulfillment of the lost tribes and all that other kind of stuff. So that's why you always have 12. And so then, and he actually gives them, Matthew labels them in pairs. The others don't necessarily put them in pairs, or they have them kind of in broken pairs. But it probably goes back to the fact that they were sent out in pairs. So Mark tells us they go out 2 by 2. And so Matthew then goes and names them 2 by 2, but they're not the same dyads, they're not the same couples as they are in some of the other Gospels. So there's no way to tell what really groups there were. But it seems to be that Matthew retains the original relationships. And you'll see that, why that happens. The other things is they move the 2 Judases together. It's probably to keep the name Judases together. And then there's another one where they move Andrew away from Peter, but that's just to keep Peter, James, and John together because they were the inner circle of disciples. So this grouping, it also makes sense. It just you'll see it. So the first, Simon, who's called Peter, and Andrew, his brother. So those 2 brothers, you go out and you hit those towns over there. Then James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother. So again, the other set of brothers, they go out. Philip and Bartholomew. And Bartholomew's probably, pretty much every commentator recognized that Bartholomew's probably another name for Nathaniel. So in John's gospel, you have Nathaniel, who he saw under the sycamore tree or the olive, whatever it was. And he said, I saw you, and there's no guile, and everything like that. So Philip and Nathaniel, for Bartholomew, have been together from the very beginning. They're very early disciples, and they're sent off as a couple, as a dyad. And Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector. Of course, Matthew's his community, at least, is writing this gospel. And then James, the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus. And Thaddeus, what's the other name? Well, there was another name that he could have been, but a lot of people had, and we see this, that it's not so much, so you have Paul and Saul, you have Peter and Cephas, or Simon, and so you have all these different names. A lot of people in the ancient world, Matthew and Levi, a lot of people in in Israel had a Hebrew name and a Roman name. You know, it's my sister-in-law now, Xiao Yu, is Chinese, and since she got sick of spelling Xiao Yu for everybody, if she goes to Starbucks or something, she just says her name's Grace, because everybody knows how to spell that, except when they don't spell it right, which is really funny because she got really upset about that one time. But it's the same kind of thing. If it was hard to communicate using their Hebrew name, they could just use their Roman name. So probably where you have two different names, a lot of people get confused by that, but it's probably one writer records their Roman name and the other writer is recording their Hebrew name. It was a very common thing at the time. So anyway, so James the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the Cananean, and Judas Iscariot who betrayed him. Now Cananean doesn't mean he's from Canaan. It's not the right word for that. It's actually a word that meant zealot, and it probably meant that he was part of the kind of militaristic Jews that wanted to drive the Romans out militaristically. So him and Judas being together probably makes sense because they were the ones that were I guess in modern parlance it would be they were the extreme right wing guys. But they probably did well together, which is kind of probably not good for Simon the Cananean to always have his name associated with Judas Iscariot. But those were those names came from. So they went out 2 by 2. Now, when we read this, I want you guys to be very attentive to this because it's very interesting that we know what happened to the disciples. We know what they did and what happened to Christ, the crucifixion, resurrection, the rising on the third day, then the book of Acts, and in all these things, we kind of have the whole story. So we forget to actually place ourselves in the moment when this is happening. Now, they've been with Christ for, I don't know how long into the ministry this is because Matthew doesn't follow chronology, but they've been with him for months, watching him do these things. And now he's saying, oh, by the way, I'm going to send you out, and you're going to cast out demons and heal people. And they must be going, excuse me? wait just a second. What's supposed to happen here? But when we read through this, I want you to be attentive to what he's saying to them. And one of the examples a commentator gave is it's kind of like when you go on a roller coaster, you kind of start going click, 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 and you're kind of getting excited, you're happy, and you're kind of, ooh, this is going to be awesome. And you get to the top, and all of a sudden it plunges like 4 stories, and you're looking over the edge, and like, oh my goodness, you want me to do what? And watch what happens, because that's exactly the way that this feels. So now Christ is going to go into his discourse that Matthew collected together. And it's very obvious, even just reading it now, it's very obvious that Matthew pulled these things together from different points in Christ's ministry. It does not read like one single speech. Because one point he's talking about the mission itself. When you go out in this very particular circumstance, this is what's going to happen. And then he starts talking in very eschatological terms. At the end of time, this is going to happen. So what Matthew did is he collected all these teachings about how to be a disciple and how to go in mission into the world, and he collects it all up into one thing. So you have to be careful when you read this because some of the commands, teachings, whatever you want to call them, are very specific to a particular instance at a particular time. Like don't take an extra tunic, don't take extra sandals, don't take an extra staff. That's specific to what's going on with the disciples, with the apostles. But then when he says, you can't put anybody above me, not your mother, father, not brother, sister, all that sort of thing, that's not specific to one instance. That's more eschatological. That's more kind of universal. So you have to make sure that you're keeping that in mind. But Matthew drew this all together to talk about what it meant to be a disciple of Christ going out into the world. So these 12, go ahead.
How do you know whether it's a bigger picture than
it's really obvious. When we go through it, yeah, you'll see it. I mean, when he starts talking about brother will deliver up brother to death, father his child and children, that's not what's going to happen when the disciples go out to towns. People are either going to listen to them or they're going to kick them out. When you start talking about being delivered up to kings and governors and don't worry about what you're going to say, but they're going to take you to the synagogues, everything else. Now he's talking about the broader mission after his ascension. Okay. So these 12 Jesus sent out charging them, go nowhere among the Gentiles, enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So it's not just some lost sheep like we were just talking about. It's not some. It's all. All of Israel is the lost sheep. They've been scattered. They don't recognize the Messiah. The shepherds come into their midst and they don't see him. So he's saying, go get them and gather them into me. Now, this should be a little bit shocking to us, especially knowing what we know now. So I'm not ethnically Jewish, and then also having seen what's been going on, because the very first thing Matthew does is has a bunch of pagans come worship Christ. And there's all of these implications that the Gentiles are going to have access to the salvation that's been offered to Israel. You had it just the chapter before with the centurion asking for his servant to be healed, and Jesus said, well, yeah, of course, and you kind of have this implication that salvation is going to be open to everyone. And the first thing he tells his disciples is don't go anywhere except for to Israel. Don't go to the Gentiles. And so that should grate on your ears a little bit. Now, obviously, that's a temporary command, because of the Great Commission, he says, go out to the, to throughout Jerusalem and the ends of Judea, to Samaria, and to the ends of the world. And he goes, tell all nations, baptizing all nations in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, all that kind of stuff. What's going on here is twofold. The one is very practical. If he goes out and starts saying, go to the Gentiles, he's going to completely lose all credibility among the Jews. You see it happening with Paul all the time in the book of Acts and with his letters. He's always arguing for the validity of his mission, because everybody's like, you're going to the Gentiles, what's the matter with you? So if Christ, before he'd even established himself as God through his resurrection, had said, we're going to go hang out with the Gentiles, then he would have had no credibility with Israel anymore. So part of this is preserving the credibility of the mission to the Jews by saying, just go to the Jews right now. They're ready to hear, or as ready as they're going to be to hear. And we don't want to rock the boat too much. And then the second part of it is quite simply that the Messiah was promised to Israel. And so the coming of the kingdom is coming through Israel, not for Israel, but it's going to come through Israel. So there's an urgency. One of the commentators said it's like there's a freight train coming, and you need to be ready. You need to get ready for it, because it's bearing down on us. It's present, and it's kind of almost a warning. So it's kind of going to Israel saying, this is the point in our history where God is delivering us as he has promised for so long. And if you don't get off the tracks, you're going to get flattened. So we need to get ready, because it's coming. So he's going to the lost sheep of Israel to tell them the time is now. It's occurring. What we've been waiting for has now happened. And so there's this big wake-up call. And there's an urgency to get that to Israel first, because Israel should know better and should recognize it. The Gentiles aren't going to have any clue what's going on until somebody comes along like Paul and is able to articulate it for them in terms of they understand. But the Jews should be able to understand. So he says, don't go anywhere except for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and preach as you go, saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Not it's coming, it's at hand. You are experiencing the kingdom of God. And so the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God is interchangeable. A Jew would prefer the term kingdom of heaven, because they wouldn't be risking saying the name of God in vain. So they wouldn't say heaven of God, the kingdom of God, they'd say the kingdom of heaven. So there's Matthew saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Now, again, we tend to think of this as something that's going to happen when we all die and go to heaven, that the kingdom of heaven is something that's coming. But that's not what Scripture teaches. It's not what Christ taught. It's not what the disciples experienced. The kingdom of heaven is at hand through the person of Christ, the breaking in of his power, and the establishment of a different way of living. The problem is nobody recognized it. We still have trouble recognizing it. So he's saying that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and then he gives you how they can recognize that. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out demons. So all the things that Christ was doing already. Now you disciples go do it, because the kingdom of heaven is Christ himself, but I don't want to use the word mediated, because a lot of people, but it's also passes through us, and we extend that kingdom through living within that kingdom. So he says, go out and do these things, let them see that the kingdom is near. You received without paying, give without pay. Which is what we sing when we talk about the holy mercenaries. Take no gold, nor silver, nor copper, and that was the smallest coin, in your belts, no bag for your journey, nor 2 tunics, nor sandals, nor a staff, for the laborer deserves his food. Now, you can't really shake the dust off your feet if you're not wearing sandals, But probably what he's saying here is don't take an extra set of sandals, don't take an extra staff, don't go pack, don't go get ready. Just as you are right now, out the door and go. And the reason he's saying that is twofold. The one is he doesn't want anybody to be accused of doing this for money, because even at that time you had traveling philosophers, whether they were cynics or whoever, that would go around, and you had those who then manipulated that for their own gain. So you had authentic, genuine prophets, philosophers, whatever, but then you also had those that were fraudulent. The kind of the same thing we have is we have some televangelists that are actually really doing wonderful work and really love Christ and really trying to do his work, whether they're confused or not is a whole other conversation to have. And then you have others that, quite frankly, are just venal and manipulative and doing it for their own enrichment. If you take no money, not even a penny for what you do, it's very hard to accuse you of doing this for money. So part of this is protective. He says, don't take anything, that way people can't accuse you. But the other spiritual too is if you're excuse me, if you're running around worried about your sandal strap breaking, or if you're worried about, by the way, you need 2 tunics if you slept outdoors. You would have one to, be your tent, and you'd sleep in the other one. So what he's basically saying is, I want you to go out in a way that is utterly and completely dependent on God's providence for you. I don't want you to take anything that's going to make it easier for you, not because I want you to suffer, but because I want you to recognize God's providence for you. And where he says this bit, for the labor deserves his food, he's saying that you're going to go out and work that people need to provide for you. And God will provide for you through the people. Whatever town or village you enter, find out who is worthy in it and stay with him until you depart. And he's saying that so they don't shop around for a better house. Somebody comes over to my house, and then somebody down the street who has a nicer house invites them over, and they're like, oh yeah, let's go over there. But it's to go to wherever you stay, that's where you stay. Don't look for material comfort and pleasure. Oh, yep, somebody just answered me. Jude. You're right, Hannah. Yeah, it's Jude. It's Thaddeus. Good job. That's probably a long time ago. I just now noticed. Okay. Now, the other thing is that the key of the 12 apostles was written about this same time. And it actually has very clear instructions that you can stay for 3 days. If you stay for more than 3 days, or actually you stay a third day, you're a false prophet. It says 1 day's good, 2 days is all right, but not 3 days. So I don't know how long they stayed in the village, but there is, you'll notice, it's a very strong sense of urgency. Now, this is what's really interesting. At least it's always been, because I never understood this. As you enter the house, salute it. Give your blessing. So basically, it's shalom. You would offer a blessing upon the home. And if the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like it's throwing a boomerang. Like if it comes back, it's not. Or if people say, and peace be to you, does that mean that's your sign that you're supposed to leave because they returned your peace? But what's going on here is this idea that they're not just going and saying hello. He didn't say go to their house and say hello. Go to your house and offer a ritual, formal blessing upon the house. And so you're basically imparting something upon this family. You are actually asking, and it's kind of an Orthodox understanding of blessing as opposed to the Protestant understanding of blessing, to say, oh, well, bless you. It's kind of a nice sentiment, but it's not really anything concrete. Whereas an Orthodox blessing is, we literally think something sacramental is happening, that we're asking God to kind of indwell and participate in something in a very particular way. So they're saying, go ahead and do this to the house you go to. If it's worthy, they'll provide you hospitality and everything's okay. If they're not worthy, don't worry, that blessing will return to you. It will be removed from the home and be returned to you, and you can move on to the next place. So it's really kind of this assurance of just be generous with your blessing and let God handle whether or not it's going to it's going to take root or not, I guess is the one way of saying it. So this idea is you go to the house, the first person to offer you a place to stay, you go stay there, you offer this kind of formalized blessing, and if they offer you hospitality, that's the place you stay, and you stay there for as long as you're in that town. And if anyone will not receive you or listen to your words, so like if the whole town kicks you out, shake off the dust from your feet as you leave that house or town. Truly I say to you, it shall be more tolerable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah than for that town. Now this act of shaking, and all priests talk about it all the time, like if, I had a good friend who was a priest up north in a different metropolis, not actually north, but kind of towards the other way. And he had an awful experience, which is why I'm being a little bit, well, I'm not telling you exactly what it is, but he had an awful experience. And literally, as he was driving away after he got reassigned, he stopped his car at the end of the driveway, and he took his shoes off and he dusted them on the ground. Oh my God. So this has kind of come to mean to us when we're really frustrated with something, we dust our feet. But what it meant, actually, the actual ritual activity is what a Jew did when they returned back to Israel after being in a pagan place or a Gentile place. Because remember, there's this sense that those places are defiled and unclean. So if you're tracking in dust and dirt from there, it is unclean, defiled earth and dirt. So you knock it off your shoes to show you are not part of Israel. You're not part of the kingdom. I don't want to bring your defilement into the kingdom, so I'm going to leave it out there as I enter into the kingdom. So to actually knock the dust off your shoes isn't just a petulant kind of act of, thumbing your nose at them. It's actually saying, it's a very ritualistic way of expressing, you are not part of this kingdom. You are an outside land to what's going on.
Wow.
Exactly. It's
Think
really
about the other times where
Mhm.
Paul did it.
right.
He did it too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So this thing is saying you're not part of the kingdom. So yeah, it's a very powerful symbolic action. Truly, I say, it should be more tolerable than Sodom and Gomorrah. Everybody knows Sodom and Gomorrah as the Dead Sea now. You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah, the dead Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed.
Well, I
and-
knew there was a story.
Right, and nothing's been able to grow there for thousands of years.
It's the Dead Sea.
That's where Sodom and Gomorrah was.
I had no idea.
Yeah, there's actually a pillar of salt there that they say it's the actual name for it in Arabic, I think, is Lot's wife.
Wow.
Yeah, kind of cool.
That's good.
Yeah, there you go. Everybody goes there to take a bath. Good luck with that.
That's interesting.
So, so now here, this is the part where he's very specific. He's obviously talking about the mission. You go out 2 by 2. You go to these houses. You do this. This is how you enter. This is what you do if you receive. This is what you do if you're not received. And then you move on. And this is the kind of the part where if you're a disciple, you're kind of going, ooh, I get to cast out demons. I get to cleanse lepers. I get to raise the dead. I get to heal the sick. All these things. I got this. You got it. I got all this authority. I go to the house. God's going to take care of me. I get to knock off my dust. I go, okay, awesome. And you click, 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 and then you turn and you look down, and Christ says, behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. And remember, this is a shepherd society, so this would have been a very clear metaphor for them. You send a sheep out into a pack of wolves, and it's not going to last very long. Not long at all, even if they're not that hungry. So he's saying that you are going into danger. You are going into mortal danger. You will always be threatened. You will always have people hunting you. So this isn't, and I put my notes in I actually wrote it even in my Bible. I said, not a good sales pitch. Imagine, coming to Christ and him saying, well, I've got a job for you, and this is what's going to happen. But here the thing is this is still true for us. Maybe in more spiritual terms than material, physical terms, just because of the kind of society we live in, but even then I think it's even more dangerous. Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. And that's very interesting because the serpent is Genesis 3 and is actually described as being shrewd, as being wise. Maybe not wise, but shrewd is really the better word because wise almost has a connotation of goodness with it. It's being shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves. And think about that kind of juxtaposition because those two things together become very powerful. If so Sev's asking, why would they worry about a blessing being returned to them? And I'm not really sure. I think the general idea is that they wouldn't want to bless somebody who wasn't worthy of being blessed. So there might be a concern amongst them that if they bless this house and they turned out to be unworthy, that they'd done something wrong. So what Christ is telling them is if you bless this home and it's not worthy, don't worry about having blessed that home because that blessing will be removed from it and returned to you, and then you can move on. But remember, it's actually, it's not just saying a blessing is in, hey, you're a nice person, how are you doing? And it's just being words. There's actually something being not consecrated, that's too strong a word, but there's an actual thing that's occurring. There's actually a blessing being offered onto the home that has real effects. And so if they're not worthy for it, it'd almost be like saying, the kind of the argument now, I suppose, is saying, if you're going to give money to an organization, but it ends up being, a criminal organization, you're really upset that you supported something you didn't want to support. So maybe that was what was going on in the disciples' minds. At least that's the way I think about it. I'm not really sure. That part's really confused me. Let your peace return to you. But what they're saying is let the blessing be removed from those who it's not worthy, and you will carry it with you to the next place where they are worthy. That's the best I can think I can do with it.
Do you think it's also like that they could have just been offended that they didn't receive it and say, "Oh, just be at peace. Don't worry about it." Like, could it be as simple as that? Like, let your peace return to you. Like, just be at peace.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So let your peace. No, because that'd be switching the meaning of peace within one sentence. And I don't think Matthew really does that. I mean, I think it's used in a more particular way with the shalom. But yeah, I see what you're saying is let your peace return to you. Don't get agitated that, something bad happened. Just let your calm return to you. But I think he's using it in a very particular sense of this kind of formal ritualized blessing. That'd be a nice way of wiggling out of it. I don't think we get it that easy. It is kind of a hard saying. It's a little bit confusing. But the message, what's going on within the text, is simply saying that, you go and bless this home, and then with your presence, you're teaching, and if they don't accept you, it's okay, move along, and let God handle everything else. Let me see if I have any other questions on this. The Spanish version says, be prudent as serpents. Yeah, prudent, shrewd. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways. I'd have to go back. I didn't actually look up the Greek word for it. But the message is the same. So here's the thing: is you put those two things together, it becomes powerful. But if you're innocent as a dove without any kind of prudence or shrewdness, you become naive. If you are shrewd without any kind of innocence, then you become very manipulative. And so when you put the two of them together, then you get somebody who can protect themselves, can carry out their mission, but still retains. And innocence doesn't mean naivete. It doesn't mean they walk around like little children. It just means that they don't let their hearts get hardened when they're attacked. They don't let themselves lack forgiveness to people when they harm them. It's you still keep your kind of your purity and your softened heart and your compassion and your tenderness, the things we talk about, but yet you also are shrewd and wise in the way that you handle things. Cunning is another word. Yeah, Bill's saying cunning. And then Marina's saying Labeus. Labeus is actually a textual variant for that name, but the name was Jude, is what's used in the other Gospels. Hannah figured that one out. There we go. I think I've got through all the questions. Well, I love this. All this interaction. I don't feel alone at all anymore. I've got somebody here, and I got people going back and forth. This is awesome. So this whole thing of wise, prudent, shrewd, cunning, all these things as serpents or innocent as doves, you have to be both. And that's how you survive being amidst the wolves. So they're sent out and they need to have both of those qualities. Beware of men, and this is where we're starting to shift towards an eschatological kind of teaching. So beware of men, for they will deliver you up to councils and flog you in their synagogues. You'll be dragged before governors and kings for my sake. And we see that, Pontius Pilate, and we see Felix, and we see the kings with Herod and Archippus and all these other guys. You'll be dragged before governors and kings for my sake to bear testimony before them and the Gentiles. When they deliver you up, do not be anxious how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you in that hour. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brother will deliver up brother to death, father his child, children will rise against parents and have them put to death, and you will be hated by all for my name's sake. Sign me up. It's like this whole list of all the suffering and all the persecution. He said, you're going to go out there and you're going to be given this power to preach and to heal and to express the kingdom of God. And by the way, the response of the people around you is going to be to arrest you, to put you on trial, to persecute you. And it's not just going to be strangers. It'll be even to the intimate relationships of family. And so this is kind of where the whole thing just drops off in the roller coaster. And all of a sudden they're like, you've got to be kidding me. So you have this idea of this is what a disciple is going to do, and then this is what's going to happen to a disciple, which is really quite frightening. And then he says, but he who endures to the end will be saved. When they persecute you in one town, flee to the next. For truly I say to you, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. Matthew's the only one who includes that little detail. The other synoptics don't have that. And it's very interesting because we have this sense, especially if you look at kind of evangelical circles, people are smuggling Bibles into Saudi Arabia, or they're doing all these things that get them persecuted, even killed, and they're going, ooh, what heroes for Christ. What did Christ tell his disciples to do? If they don't like you, run away. If you go into a town and they don't want to hear it, get out of there. There's another town. Go to that next town. What's happening here is this sense of urgency. And that comes through if you understand you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. This is a huge topic of conversation because
he's there.
Because you're there, right?
So
but what does he mean by Son of Man? He doesn't. So Son of Man is him, but Son of Man is in his messianic glory. Okay, so the Son of Man in Daniel is when the Son of Man will appear kind of, I don't, it doesn't say in the heavens, but appears in his power. So when he talks about the Son of Man, he's talking about his messianic identity. So people go, well, it either means the second coming, or else it means something about like the destruction of Israel or some kind of coming in power. But if you say he's gone through all the towns of Israel, so here's the problem. He hadn't come back yet. So if it's the second coming, they've had plenty of time to go through all the towns of Israel. So some people say, oh, it means the diaspora as well, all the Jews that have been scattered to the ends of the earth. Which, by the way, is the way that Zionistic, what do you call them, the Christians, a lot of the fundamentalist evangelical Christians see this verse as the mission to the Jews. We have to convert all the Jews, because once all the Jews have been converted, we will have been through all the towns of Israel, and then the Son of Man will come again. So they interpret this in a very literal way, that we have to convert all Jews, and then the Son of Man will come. Probably what's going on there, though, it's not talking about that, because if you look at the Son of Man passages, it's talking not about the Son of Man coming to earth, but the Son of Man going to heaven and appearing in power and glory. Not here, if you look in Daniel, if you understand the way the Son of Man is used. So he's probably not talking about the Son of Man returning and coming to earth. He's talking about the Son of Man going the other direction. So it's likely that what this is, although you can't be sure, is that he's talking about the ascension. So when he rises up in power in his messianic glory to ascend to the right hand of the Father and to be enthroned as Messiah, as Christ Jesus is the King, then this is what he's talking about. So he said, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. In other words, before my ascension. Now, regardless of how you read that, and I think it's really important to read it right, but in the way I was talking about it, but the sense you get there is you're in a hurry. You guys can't lollygag. You can't sit around in town and be like, no, really, I think you should really look at the messianic prophecies and now look at Jesus, and you see how they all fit together. So you go in there, you preach. You're like, okay, what do you guys think? All right, no? All right, I'm out. Yes, good. We'll be back later. But there's this sense of this coming freight train literally aimed right at Israel. And we've got to warn as many people as we can. We've got to call as many people awake. We've got to shake as many people awake as we can. So you got to get from town to town to town to town. There's going to be plenty of time later, but we need to have people prepared for the Messiah now, because he's coming. Because we're within a year or two of this happening. So we need to make sure that we wake them up. And so there's that sense of urgency for the coming of the Messiah, who of course is in their midst, but won't be fully recognized until after the crucifixion and resurrection. So now you have this whole idea of what's going to happen when they go out as disciples. They're going to be persecuted, they're going to be arrested, they're going to be brought before people, and people are going to have them put to death. And so at this point, all the disciples are kind of going, okay, sure, if you say so. And so then what Christ does is he reassures them. And he tells them, don't be afraid. And you're going to see that. He says, have no fear, like 3 or 4 times in the next few passages. We got time. So a disciple's not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. And this is a pretty common, I mean, we see this in all the Gospels, in all the Synoptic Gospels. And it's a very common idea within Israel at the time, even within Hellenistic philosophy, is, you see it when you're teaching, Plato didn't see himself as above Socrates, and he was never going to be above Socrates. You might be able to get on par with him, but he's not going to be above him. Your teacher teaches you, and then you just aspire to become as the master. So Christ is saying, look, you shouldn't expect to be treated any differently than I'm treated. You shouldn't expect for people to be any less persecutorial, any less persecuting of you than they were of me. So he's a disciple not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for the disciple to be like his teacher, and the servant to be like his master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebul, which is the prince of demons, how much more will they malign those of his household? So if you go tell the general that he's a coward, even more so you're going to think of his subordinates as cowards. And that's what they're struggling with. The apostles paving the way for Jesus, the Son of Man, to come to that town. So Bill, it's not necessarily the way for Jesus, although we see that as they're traveling through Samaria, they actually are preparing them for Jesus to come. But what they're doing is think of St. Justin Martyr when he talks about the seeds of the truth. They're preparing the hearts and the minds and the expectations of the people in those towns that once Christ has then resurrected and established his church, that when they come into the town now and they say, okay, this is the faith you've been waiting for, then they can receive it. So they're preparing the way for faith in Christ to come to those towns. And in some instances, Jesus comes to those towns, but for the most part, especially as he turns towards Jerusalem, he's not necessarily going to come to those towns until he comes in through his disciples. No more questions. Okay. So, where did we just get to? So the man comes, disciple, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so here he goes. So have no fear. Here's where he starts saying, I know I just freaked you out. I know you're frightened because you're going to get persecuted, but have no fear. So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. What I tell you in the dark, utter in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim upon the housetops. So this is a little bit confusing if you don't think through it. And so what he's saying is, don't be afraid to tell people what I've taught you, because you're worried that later on people are going to say, what an idiot. He was totally gullible and he fell for it. What he's saying is that you need to understand that as time goes on, you will be revealed as the faithful remnant of Israel. You will be revealed as those who recognize the Messiah. You will be revealed as the ones who understood the true plan of God. So don't chicken out now, and don't worry about saying all those things I've taught you in secret, all these things that I have been coaching you in. Go out and proclaim them openly, because it will be, you will be, what's the word I'm looking for? Vindicated in the end. You know, that you will be shown to be true in the end. So don't be worried about whether or not people will recognize you for who you are. You know, you're going to get persecuted, but as time moves on, you will be recognized as the true remnant of Israel. And of course, that's happened. But what I tell you in the dark, utter in the light. What you hear whispered, proclaim upon the housetops. So this proclamation, what I have prepared you for, go out and proclaim openly. And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. So, okay, that's the Roman authorities and the people who can have me put to death. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell, Gehenna. And then he goes on and says, are not two sparrows sold for a penny? But this phrase, fear those who can destroy the body but not the soul, rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. That's a very controversial phrase, and a lot of people were not sure how to read that. And I looked through the church fathers to see if I could come up with a clear consensus, and they kind of gloss over it. So there must have been a sense that they understood it without the debates. But the question becomes, and it's very odd that this question would be here, him who can destroy both soul and body in hell, who's he talking about? Who do you think he's talking about? I know you're totally on the spot.
No, well, now I'm confused because I guess whenever I've read that before, I assume he was talking about God, because I'm assuming God is the only one who can destroy his soul.
Right, well, he's not even really saying destroy, but he's saying he can send you to hell, right?
Okay.
But it's very interesting because, and I don't know if this is kind of progressive theology entering into it, but, you know, a lot of people don't want to say that we should fear God. Not in this sense. You fear God the way you fear electricity. It's got power. But you don't fear God the way you fear an abusive father, that he's going to just go crazy and off the rails and beat you. You know, and you certainly don't fear God because he's going to destroy you in hell. Especially within the Orthodox theology, there just isn't this sense that God sends you to hell to be destroyed. It's that the love of God is the fire of hell and everything. So it really does get complex, because basically the argument is him who can destroy both soul and body in hell, is that God or is it Satan? And it's very challenging, because you're like, wait a second, how could we be confused between God and Satan?
Well, this is the first time, the way that you said it is the first time that I've questioned whether they're talking about God in this passage.
Yeah. So it gets interesting. Most commentators just go, oh yeah, it's talking about God. God can destroy soul and body in hell, and you know,
Satan destroy soul and body?
So if you look, everybody's jumping in now. Devil, yes. Bill thinks it's the devil. So here's the thing. It could be either, depending on how you understand the passage. If you're saying that.
Well, do you mean ultimately destroy?
No. You're talking about who can kill the soul, or who can kill both body and soul in hell. So the way it would be the devil, the way it would be the demons, is that in this, honestly, that's the way that I lean. I kind of think it's probably talking about demonic forces, not necessarily God. Mm-hmm. Because God can destroy both soul and body, but I don't think, at least from an Orthodox phroneme, an Orthodox understanding of things, we don't typically think of God as serving God out of fear of being punished. And even all the church fathers are always like, that's not the right way to think about God. And the idea of how we understand the fire of hell is the love of God and all these other things that we talk about, it makes this kind of problematic. So do I risk martyrdom because I'm less worried about being killed, but I don't want to go to hell? That doesn't seem to be the right reason to go to martyrdom. Martyrdom is out of love, not out of fear. And so it becomes problematic in that sense. But if what he's talking about is, he's saying, don't have any fear of them, proclaim what I've told you to proclaim. Don't fear those who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. So don't be worried about the kings. Don't be worried about the governors. Don't be worried about the Pharisees. Don't be worried about the Sanhedrin. Don't be worried about the local council. Don't be worried about the synagogues and everything else, because they can kill you, absolutely. But if you apostatize your faith, if you look at the temptations of Christ, if you bow down to the powers of the world in order to save your life, you have now cast yourself off from the life-giving communion with Christ.
Well, that makes sense in light of just, I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard you talk about it, so maybe it's the same. But in Ephesians, where it says who our war is really against, in light of that.
Yeah, the powers and principalities and everything else. Yeah,
but like just this idea that there is. Never mind.
No, you're exactly right. And what he's saying is is that there is spiritual warfare going on, and without getting too much on a tangent on that. So what he's saying is, don't be afraid of the physical warfare. Be afraid of the spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
That you don't want to be drawn off. You don't want. I mean, Judas is the example, right? Judas wanted Christ to be the sort of Messiah he wanted him to be, and he wanted him to be powerful and be worldly and everything else. And he didn't recognize who Christ was, and so he ended up betraying Christ. What are we saying? Only God has power to judge the soul. Here we go. Orthodox Study Bible has them capitalized and